I've got a problem. My sedum has splurged. There's a great big hole in the middle of it, and I don't quite know what to do about it. What do you reckon? Now, if you're a novice gardener like me, I would love it if you would consider subscribing to my channel. All you need to do is to tap the button marked subscribe, and that means next time you open the YouTube app on your phone, your tablet or your computer, one of my videos will be waiting for you. And if you're a gardener with more expertise, why don't you share your thoughts in the comments underneath the video? So this is the problem. My sedum has splurged and I've ended up with a huge hole in the middle. We probably bought this plant about 20 years ago or more, and it's given us good service. It's got lovely dark leaved foliage and a paler flower than you might usually expect from a sedum. But just look at that. It's flopped out and it's just a mass of bare twigs. Now, when my friend Sue from Country Lane Flowers came by a few weeks ago, she said to me I just ought to bite the bullet and cut everything off. But am I feeling brave enough? Well, I'm starting to have a go. And is this going to encourage new growth? I guess I won't know until next year. So this isn't my part of the garden. This is definitely my husband's part of the garden. And it's looking a little bit unruly, so I did ask his permission before I started, and he did ask that I left some of the flowering balloons so that the nectar-loving insects in the garden could still have something to enjoy. If you're a flower arranging fan, watch on to the end of the video because I'll show you how I use these cuttings to make a flower arrangement to enjoy in my kitchen rather than dumping them straight onto the compost heap. And look at our poor plant, it's been absolutely scalped. Really hoping it's going to rejuvenate in the springtime. Now let's get on with the exciting bit, my reward for doing a little bit of the hard work in the garden. So I'm not going to throw my sedum heads straight onto the compost heap. Perhaps if you were a real gardener, that's what you do. But everything I grow in the garden, I like to give it a second life indoors so I can enjoy a little bit of my garden inside. And as we're drawing into the autumn months, I particularly like bringing the garden indoors because quite often the wet weather, the wind, the low temperatures means being outside isn't particularly enjoyable. So I have found myself a vintage vase. This is something I bought from a car boot sale for literally about £1. And if you love car boot sales, thrifting, visits to the charity shop, check out the playlist that I've got on my charity shop adventures. I'm sure you'll find something that you wish you would have bought too. Now my sedum are past their best, and just because they've got holey leaves and they've got those bendy arching stems, it doesn't mean they're worthless. What I'm doing is taking each stem and taking a careful look at it, pulling off any of the leaves that will sit inside the vase. You don't want anything rotting in the water, but I'm also taking off what you might think is quite a lot of the other leaves, and that's because they've been eaten. So you may think I'm making an arrangement out of leftovers, and you'd be entirely right, but I want those discarded stems to be as perfect as they can be. So I'm taking off a lot of the green. It's been nibbled, and also you'll see that my vase hasn't got a particularly big opening. Well, I thought it was a large opening to start with, but the sedum stems are quite chunky, and if anything I should have taken off even more leaves just to give my stems a little bit of breathing space. The challenge I've got with this flower arrangement is I do not have a single straight stem in the bunch. Everything has got that arched curve to it because the flowers had flopped from the centre and were growing upwards and outwards towards the light, which means every single flower wants to nod out over the sides of the vase. It's fine when that happens with one or two, but I don't want to end up with a hole in the middle of my flower arrangement. So I'm cutting the stems quite carefully, perhaps shorter than I might naturally do, to make sure that they lock inside the vase. Because the flower heads are at the end of the bent stems, there is that worry that the flowers might actually try and cartwheel out of the vase. It's all about the principles and elements of floral design, one of which is actual balance, and I want to make sure my flowers stay where I want them to be. I quite enjoy flower arranging outside. It means you can make a bit of a mess and then all the discarded stems and leaves can go straight onto the compost heap. If you prefer doing your flower arranging indoors, you've always got that tricky bit of making sure you've swept up everything from the kitchen floor once you've finished, and you'll always find one stray stem or leaf somewhere. Do you see what I mean about that hole in the middle of my vase? Everything is arching out gently to the sides and I've got nothing in the middle. So what I'll end up doing is, rather than aiming my stems into the vase, perversely I'll be thinking about the flower head and then trying to get the flower head in the right place and just letting the stem fall where it needs to in order that it starts to lock in place, and I end up with flowers going right the way across the centre of the vase rather than just around the edges. What do you think? Not too bad for a vase of leftovers, and that's what I love about my garden. I want to get that feeling of abundance with my cut flowers, and hopefully next year I'll have more variety and more growth throughout the summer season. And I've got a new place to display my flowers. This is a hostess trolley, which I think my mum and dad must have been given as a wedding present in the 1950s. And I like the fact I've got it in front of these windows so I can enjoy that inside-out feel with my flowers. Be warned though, I wouldn't do this in the height of summer because my flowers would get absolutely fried. And I thought you'd like to see my newly planted sedum. This was planted last year. 2 plants which are bulking up nicely and have got that fabulous autumn colour to them. But what else has been happening in the garden? I cannot believe it, my dahlias are in flower in October. This is the best show I've had all year. And in fact, these dahlias here were the ones that I'd planted last year. And because there was absolutely no sign of them coming up, I planted another set in the summertime when I bought some plants from a local yard sale when I visited Ramsgate in June or July, something like that. But don't they look fabulous? I wonder how much longer they're going to last. I've certainly got lots of buds, and fingers crossed the frost is a long way off. Right at the back of the beds here are this year's plantings. I can see I've got a little bit of deadheading to do there. But again, there are plenty of buds to keep me going for a few more weeks. I'm wondering whether to be brave and cut whole lengths of the flower rather than as individual blooms. Eventually it's going to be a case of trying to beat the frost. Now, what else is new in the garden? There's been lots of rain, so my cosmos have keeled over. I need to cut those and put them in a vase. And I've also got a few stems of zinnia still showing some flower. So I reckon throughout the season, I've probably had about 20 stems of zinnia to enjoy indoors, which is much better than my last year's effort when I only got about half a dozen. Now let's go closer to the kitchen window because there was something fabulous that I've been enjoying as I make my cup of tea in the morning. Ta-da! My nerine is in flower. In fact, I don't think the camera is picking up the intensity of the pink of this beautiful flower. What I'm going to do in order to show the flower off more is to pull out the borage, which has gone over now, and just give my nerines a little bit of breathing space so they can really show off. Dare I cut one and bring it indoors? I must admit I've been enjoying it as I stand at the kitchen sink, so I may well break my own rule of growing flowers to cut and arrange for indoors by keeping it out in the garden. What would you do? Let me know in the comments. Well, thank you so much for joining me in the garden today, and let me know, did I do the right thing with my sedum and give it that severe haircut? Well, that's all for me for now, and I'll see you in the garden next time.